Qiang Jin Jiu. Book 2, Other Heroes of Chaos. Chapter 186, Blizzard. The boundary between heaven and earth was blurred as a blizzard assaulted the battlegrounds and completely engulfed the eastern mountain range of the Hanjian Mountains. No matter where the eyes roamed, it was a boundless expanse of white snow. Hassan had initially left, but the snowstorm tonight was too strong. Worried about losing his bearings in the snowfields, he could only head back to the abandoned relay station. The scorpions that Hassan was leading this time all possessed faces that bore a striking resemblance to the natives of Great Zhou. They had already taken off the layer of armor they had worn as their disguise and were currently sitting around together drinking tea. Zhou, one of the scorpions, wiped at the token and struggled to discern the text on it under the glow of the fire. This one surnamed Zhou. Huh. Mine surnamed Fu. Another person raised a token. It's a man from Dying. Wolves all hail from Dying. A bearded man with a scar looked around at these younger generations jesting around before his gaze finally landed on Hassan, who had been silent throughout. You slew the king of wolves tonight. Hassan, from now on, you reign supreme on the battlefields in the north. The northern battlegrounds had always belonged to the king of wolves. Having occupied the highest peak of Hanjian Mountains with his valiance and prowess, Xiao Fangxiu had for the last 20 years, struck fear in the hearts of the 12 tribes of Bianxia at the mere mention of his name. Everyone present was acutely familiar with the legends surrounding him. Tonight, they had returned victorious, and the person they had slain was no ordinary mortal, but the god of Libe. Hassan, who was drinking his tea, smiled shyly at Wulihan after hearing what the latter had said. Hassan had always possessed an understated intelligence, but after tonight, no one would dare to belittle him. Wulihan could already predict just how fast Bianxia would raise through Libe in the next few years. They understood the present Libe all too well. Xiao Jiming had yet to recover from his serious injuries, and Xiao Qiye was still a fledgling, still wet behind his ears. In addition, there was a severe dearth of commanding generals, and Libe was facing an insurmountable winter. Hassan had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. But you don't look very happy, Wulihan said. He is not quite what I expected. Hassan held up the bowl with both hands and remembered his war trophy. I grew up listening to legends of him. According to my own father, he's invincible. The hero will be proud of you. Wulihan thought for a moment. What you have hacked off tonight is also the head of the Libe armored cavalry. Hassan drank his tea and did not answer. But Wulihan was right. It was also the Libe armored cavalry's head that Hassan had severed this night. All along, this iron wall standing in the north had seemed to be so indestructible. But when Hassan was truly standing here, he found a fatal vulnerability in the chink of the Libe armored cavalry's armor. This troop was far too centralized. Although their faith was born of the land they stood on, they were overly reliant on their commander-in-chief. The amount of time since their establishment had been too short, and as a result every single soldier had their eyes locked on Xiao Fangxiu. It was as though as long as Xiao Fangxiu was there, the Libe armored cavalry would be invincible and triumphant in every battle. Amuer understood this principle, as did Hassan. The reign of Tianqian was the turning point in which the Libe armored cavalry was no longer in the position to hold the initiative. Xiao Jiming's retreat symbolized the beginning of its collapse, and Xiao Fangxiu's comeback made Hassan certain that this was where the crux of the Libe armored cavalry lay. Hassan's transfer to the battlefield in the north was meant for him to familiarize himself with Xiao Fangxiu. He had been following Amuer on his battles all over the land ever since he was 8 years old, and the name he had heard the most in the commander tent had been Xiao Fangxiu. At a time when Xiao Fangxiu still knew nothing of him, he was already learning about Xiao Fangxiu's military habits. Hassan did not want to win just one battle. He wanted all fronts of Libe to topple. As to who would be grief-stricken over this, it was not something he should consider, just like how Libe had never been considerate of Bianxia's sufferings. Hassan wanted to crush his opponent with all he got. He wanted to pierce through his opponent's heart, so that his opponent could never recover from the setback. The time for Bianca to turn the tables was now. They contended and tussled, sharpening their respective fangs in that accumulating debt of blood. To both parties, excessive compassion was tantamount to suicide. The scorpions scattered when the fire was about to go out and looked for a corner in which to rest. With Wulihan taking the night watch, Hassan leaned against the old cabinet and closed his eyes. The frigid wind outside howled against the eaves, sending the wind chimes hanging at the entrance of the relay station clinking and clanking violently. All that was left in the world was black and white as the night and snow tore into each other. Snowflakes that resembled tattered wads of cotton piled up to form snow dunes, and footprints left in the snow were soon swallowed up. The scorpion standing outside the relay station who was taking a piss had yet to untie his pants when he was clutched by the throat. An imperceptible crack followed right after, and the scorpion's body was slowly lowered to the ground. Wulihan, who had an acute sense of hearing, almost immediately lifted his hand to reach for his iron hammer. He stared menacingly at the door panel and whispered, "Here comes the wolf." The scorpion closest to the door shifted silently to lean over the crack between the door with the intent to peek, but in the very moment he bent over, a long blade suddenly plunged through the gap and pierced through his head. No one inside the house spoke. Hassan watched calmly as that blade retracted, painting the door with a splash of crimson. The smell of blood began to pervade the air. Right after the door was shoved open, a gush of wind extinguished the fire and plunged the house into darkness. A figure that bore a striking resemblance to Xiao Fangxiu stood in the doorway, nearly causing Wulihan to break out in cold sweat. In that long, endless silence, the scorpions within the house burst into action. They had lost nearly half of their own men when they encircled Xiao Fangxiu to kill him, and the remaining scorpions were already beyond exhausted. The fear of being stabbed through and through by the king of wolf reasserted itself again. The scorpions prayed the wolf pup did not have the same arm strength as his father, but when they came into contact with him, they were all nailed to the floor. That bit of light peeking in from the entrance was blocked out too. Thick, viscous blood splattered onto their faces. Wulihan did not wipe it off. He swung his hammer towards Xiao Qiye right in the face, the same way he smashed it towards Xiao Fangxiu. But Xiao Qiye stopped Wulihan's forearm in its tracks. Closely encircled on all sides with little space left, he did not turn around the blade he had just pulled out from the corpse, but smashed the hilt of his longly blade into Wulihan's face. Wulihan staggered, wanting to draw back, but Xiao Qiye did not release his grip, and the scorpion behind him hung onto his blade, so he immediately let go of Longly blade and punched Wulihan over with his bare fist. Wulihan's muscular body crashed into the pile of burning firewood, knocking it over. His face was drenched in blood, and he could feel that the bridge of his nose was broken. He shook his head. The impact of that heavy blow made him temporarily deaf in both ears, and for a time, he could not even see what's in front of him clearly. He spat out the tooth that had been punched off and said somewhat unintelligibly, "Kill him." Hassan sensed a pair of eyes locked on him. From the moment the door opened, this was a line of sight that would not permit him to ignore. Hassan knew what Xiao Qiye had come for, but he would not return it to Xiao Qiye, for that was the trophy he was determined to hold onto. Hassan gripped his pike dagger, but Xiao Qiye did not give Hassan the opportunity. He lifted a scorpion and held him up before the dagger, making use of that sturdy human body to slam Hassan against the cabinet. Xiao Qiye's fist missed its target, and the cabinet door promptly burst apart. The cabinet behind Hassan collapsed with a loud crash, which gave Hassan some leeway to catch his breath. The sudden assault of his pike dagger was swift and fierce, but this time, Xiao Qiye did not dodge it. Instead, he grasped it and wrenched it towards himself. Hassan had experienced for himself Xiao Qiye's strength back at the Tudalong banner. He was unable to seize his dagger back, and at the exact moment he let go, he crouched over at the waist to dodge Xiao Qiye's blow. Xiao Qiye did not throw away the dagger. He was now pinned down by Wulihan, who had pounced on him from the side. That hillock-like body slammed Xiao Qiye against the wall and Wulihan returned a heavy punch to him. The fist smashed into him like a slab of brick, causing him to bleed from his mouth. At the same time he took the punch, Xiao Qiye grabbed hold of Wulihan's collar, deflected his head to the side to dodge the blow, and followed up with a head slam to the injured bridge of Wulihan's nose. Wulihan hastily covered his nose and mouth, and Xiao Qiye turned the dagger around with his fingers. Grasping that sharp, protruding tip, he jammed the dagger between the gap of his fingers and slammed a fist into Wulihan's face, which failed to move out of the way in time. Wulihan let loose a howl of fury. The dagger was embedded in his entire right eye, and the pain made his entire body convulse with tremors. Blood poured profusely as he bent over and cursed in the Bianxia tongue. Xiao Qiye did not let Wulihan off. He yanked Wulihan by the hair and took a few quick steps to slam Wulihan's head hard against the wall. The chilling sounds of the impact persisted a few more times until the wall was awash in blood. The scorpion behind Xiao Qiye pounced and hung onto Xiao Qiye's back as he prepared to flip him over, but Xiao Qiye did not budge. He backhandedly felt for the scimitar on the scorpion's waist and released his grip on Wulihan. Wulihan cried out in pain and stumbled back. He had only taken 2 steps when he felt a cool sensation on his neck. Before he could even react, his blood spurted out like a fountain, and his head went tumbling. Xiao Qiye lifted his hand to wipe at the metallic stench of blood, revealing in the darkness a pair of extremely bright eyes that brimmed over with frenzied insanity and hatred. This gave him the appearance of a ravenous wolf, one whose sense of reason had all been devoured whole by this bout of heavy snow. He stared at Hassan and said, one word at a time, "Give my father back to me." Hassan brushed back the red hair that was hanging over his eyes and looked at Xiao Qiye as he said in a cold, detached voice, "Then, when will your father give my brother back to me?" Xiao Qiye had already sprung closer. He had no wish to hear Hassan speak at all. As both men wrestled with one another, they crashed through the window and rolled into the snowstorm. Hassan struck back with all his might and knocked Xiao Qiye down into the snow, then nimbly straightened up and stepped back as he gasped for breath. In a cold voice, he said, "Your father's armored hooves trampled his head into a pulp. Right in the midst of a blizzard. He left his corpse out there in the wilderness." Xiao Qiye propped himself up into a standing position and spat out the froth of blood in his mouth. Hassan twirled out a new pike dagger between his fingers. He slid those fingers along the cold gleam of the blade and said expressionlessly, "I'm merely returning the favor, an eye for an eye." Both men collided together again once more. The snow blew so hard amidst the roaring wind that it stung the eyes, and the gasps of their breath sounded so very guttural. Even heaven and earth were howling. Xiao Qiye locked Hassan's throat in a vice-like grip and lifted Hassan to smash Hassan's back against the damaged wall of the relay station. The force of the impact jolted the flakes of snow off the wall. Hassan grabbed Xiao Qiye's right arm and twisted it with all his might, nearly breaking it. Xiao Qiye's right hand went numb, and his old injury caused him to lose his grip, allowing Hassan to break free once again. The next instant, the remaining scorpions wrapped their arms around both of Xiao Qiye's legs, causing his entire person to tumble into the snow. Hassan grabbed the opportunity and thrust the pike dagger towards Xiao Qiye's nape from the back. Xiao Qiye braced his elbow against the ground and took the stab to the back of his left shoulder, avoiding his vital spots. Hassan tried to pull out the picked dagger, but Xiao Qiye backhandedly covered the back of Hassan's head with his hand and slammed Hassan's head down towards the ground with terrifying force, where he then held it firmly in place in the snow. Blood swiftly stained his shoulder. The dagger that had yet to be pulled out rose and fell along with each of his gasps for breath. Hassan pressed both palms against the snowy ground, and a hoarse sound escaped from his throat, but he could not lift his head. There was no way he could make Xiao Qiye's palm budge at all. Xiao Qiye yanked Hassan's red hair hard, his eyes red as he bellowed in a raspy voice, "Give him back to me." End chapter. Qiang Jin Jiu. Book 2, Other Heroes of Chaos. Chapter 187, Approach. Hassan was panting heavily. His cheek stung from being scraped by the ice on the snow field, and the nape of his neck had turned red from exertion. The howl of the wind behind Xiao Qiye's back intensified, and the sudden swing of an iron hammer knocked him over. Seizing his opportunity, Hassan climbed to his feet and spat out the ice in his mouth. The scorpions had suffered heavy losses this time. Of the remaining 10 or so men who had crossed paths with Xiao Qiye, there were only a few that was still alive. A scorpion on night patrol in the far distance blew the horn. Hassan backed off, knowing from the wind that the pack of wolves was currently charging this way. Hassan flipped onto his horse, albeit unwillingly. His hand fell to the hilt of his scimitar, but before he could do anything, the gerfalcon in the sky swooped down, its cry erupting in his ears. Following right after, a long arrow burst through the snowstorm under the billowy darkness of the night and hurtled straight for his head. Xiao Qiye braced himself against the ground. His back was soaked through, but he could not tell if it was blood or sweat. With sticky fingers, he grabbed a handful of snow and stuffed it into his mouth, swallowing down the blood between his teeth. At the same time, when he climbed to his feet, he lunged towards Hassan. Hassan was almost dragged down by this force. He struck back with his elbow, but Xiao Qiye lifted his palm to grab hold of it. Then, Hassan's world turned upside down as Xiao Qiye flung him over. Before Hassan could return a strike, a punch from Xiao Qiye made him choke out bile. Hassan hissed as he felt the ache in his mouth. He kicked Xiao Qiye hard in the chest and immediately rose swiftly with the aid of his elbows. But Xiao Qiye was just too tough to deal with. There was no way he could escape without distracting Xiao Qiye away from him. Hassan understood this feeling. He broke into a run with the horse and braced himself with his arms to flip onto it before Xiao Qiye made his next attack. He blew his whistle, then ripped off the sack hanging at the side of the horse and held it up high at Xiao Qiye. Hassan's fingers clenched tightly at that sack. Never had he felt that he was unable to take it lying down so intensely. But the very next moment, he flung the sack out. His voice cut through the wind as he said with detest at the same time as he turned his horse around, "After tonight, my name will overshadow the Libe armored cavalry. I'll make you people pay back double for what you owed me since the battles on the eastern mountain ranges." His red hair flared ostentatiously, like the manifestation of his hatred. "Take your father and scram." Xiao Qiye instantly understood what that sack was. The bitter wind raged. He staggered over the snow and dashed over with all he had. As he fell and rolled over, he caught hold of the sack firmly. Hassan instantly cracked his horsewhip and galloped away into the vast expanse of heavy snow. Xiao Qiye lay on the ground, hugging that sack as he stared at the dome of heaven. He clenched his teeth even as his chest heaved heavily, unwilling as he was to shed another tear. But he could not control the sobs. He could not. He could not look at Xiao Fangxiu in his arms. The armored cavalry swarmed over, and Zouqian Kaiu took the lead in tumbling down his horse. Countless helmets were removed in the ensuing silence. Heavy snow buried Xiao Qiye. He heard the wails of the Hanjian mountains. He no longer had the strength to stand up, for his limbs were already numb. He stared fixedly at the sky, feeling as though he had died. The Libe armored cavalry suffered their first fatal blow in 20 years, having been stabbed through and through. Hassan was right. After tonight, the Libe armored cavalry would live in his shadow. He had used tens of scorpions to sever the dignity of the Libe armored cavalry. This was too endless a night. The iron wall of Libe collapsed with a crash, leaving countless men exposed on the outside. Armor was no longer their advantage. There were like wandering souls who had been expelled here, unable to find refuge. Xiao Jiming waited to receive his father in dying. The entire city was silent when the horse carriage rolled in as suppressed sounds of crying rose and fell. Xiao Jiming did not cry. He was neatly dressed and properly crowned as he walked down the stairs, one step at a time, to stand before the carriage. A never-ending silence followed. His body, wrecked with severe injuries, seemed to have shrunk somewhat. In that heavy snow, his face was pale. A veil of gloom was cast over the firmament. The news spread throughout Great Zhou a few days later. Chu capital removed the banners of the 8 great training divisions. But as Xiao Qiye still had the charge of regicide hanging over his head, Chu capital did not issue a eulogy to Liu Bei. Instead, they merely took down the colored lanterns on the streets and hung up white flowers. Qi Ziyan, sans armor and hairpin, led a unit of guards hurriedly through the snow towards Liu Bei. Xiao Fangxiu was a legend. A junior soldier of the Loxia Pass who conquered the eastern mountain ranges of the Hanjian Mountains, he was the last person out of the 4 generals of that generation to make a name for himself. Yet, he was the one and only person out of the 4 to be conferred with the title of a prince. At the present time, Lu Pinjian was in ill health, Qi Xiu was retired, and Feng Yishan and Xiao Fangxiu had both successively perished in the war. The 4 generals from the early days of the Yangji era had all fallen into obscurity. 30 years had gone by in a rush, and those high-spirited youths with boundless enthusiasm had all returned to the lands they belonged. ******. Xiao Qiye was a picture of calm after Xiao Fangxiu's burial. His howls and cries seemed to have been buried in that bout of heavy snow, vanished without a trace after he seized his father back. He ate and changed his dressing as usual, but that night, Shen Zequan could not hear Xiao Qiye's breathing. He seemed to have fallen into a certain kind of deep slumber, languishing as he greeted each new day. ******. I'll now give you an account of the ambush that snowy night. Zhang Sheng stood bandaged in the hall and said to the commanding generals. On day 8 of the 12th month, while his lordship was in the Shay camp, he decided to lay an ambush. He then personally led Squad 3 of Shay camp up north. I was to go around from the back to provide support. The aim was to intercept Hassan in the east of the Tudalong banner. The snowstorm was especially heavy that day. We waited until the hour of U before we encountered Hassan's elite forces. Both troops engaged in a battle, and we launched a head-on assault to Hassan's elite force, injuring nearly half of them in the process. While taking inventory of the remnants of the Bianchi soldiers, we found that Hassan was not among them. At that time, it was already the hour of high. We drew up a plan in the snowfield to branch out and search westward. As such, his lordship and I split up into 2. Then I came across the Bianchi cavalry to the east of the Tudalong banner and was depleted of my remaining troops. By then, I had already sensed something amiss. Instead of continuing on westward, I took the decision into my own hands and turned back to join up with his lordship. His lordship's military strength had been similarly worn down, as the Bianchi cavalry kept engaging in guerrilla tactics in small groups. We stopped heading further in and decided to head back to the camp. Midway through, we arrived at the abandoned relay station of Changzhou camp, where we met the scorpions disguised as the Liu Bei armored cavalry. Every one of them had the token of the armored cavalry at the side of their waists. They not only spoke the Great Zhou's language but also with the Liu Bei accent. They were able to answer readily and fluently. These people claimed to be subordinates of Zhao Hui's 3 great training divisions of Liaoyang, and having sustained severe losses from Hassan's harassment and lost their way in the snowstorm, they were forced to stop over at the relay station. How many of them? With hands on his knees, Zhao Hui asked with a solemn expression. 60. Zhang Sheng set the book in his hands on the table and looked towards Xiao Qiye, who was sitting at the very end. After a few moments of silence, he spoke up. We compiled a register of names based on the token second young master brought back. You can cross-reference it? Zhao Hui quickly read through the register. These are all brothers who have died in battle. Guo Walai, whose voice had gone hoarse from crying too many times these past few days, exclaimed, "Fuck his ancestors. They even took away the armor and tokens. We have to inform all the major camps as soon as possible to clean up the battlefields personally from now on. It's futile. Guo Wulai immediately retorted. How can it be fu? His voice trailed to a stop when he saw Xiao Qiye. Xiao Qiye had brought back Xiao Fangxiu, which made it impossible for Guo Wulai to shoot his mouth off as he previously did. His expression underwent several changes, but still, he could not hold it back. We have to deal with it, eventually. We can't give them any more opportunities. If Bianchi can even equip themselves with iron hammers now, they are naturally able to counterfeit tokens as well. Zhou Qiankai understood what Xiao Qiye meant. The hardest part lies in how we can differentiate the scorpions from the rest. With his cloak draped around him, Xiao Jiming contemplated it for a moment, then said, "Recall back the tokens. We'll no longer use them. Continue with what your report." Zhang Sheng continued. Deceived by the scorpions, we lay down our blades, and that was when it all happened. At this point, he exposed half of his face. That sort of iron hammer was custom made to go up against the armored cavalry. A sudden smash to the helmet will cause blurred vision, ringing ears, and blackout if you are lucky, or you'll die on the spot bleeding from the nose and mouth. My troops couldn't react in time at all, and I was knocked unconscious to the ground. I don't know what happened after. This time, no one made a sound. They had learned about the scorpions from the private letter sent from Zongbo, but no one could have imagined the severity of the threat that the scorpions posed. Gu Jin bowed in greetings all around and took over from Zhang Sheng. After an examination of the battlefield, my conjecture is as follows: Hassan failed to besiege his lordship, so he changed his tactics to outflank his lordship from both sides on the snowfield with his elusive elite troops and had his lordship trapped in the heavy snow. This consequently led to the total annihilation of Squad 3. Damn you! I don't believe it. His lordship is invincible in the fields. Guo Wulai stood up and irritably paced up and down. Eventually, he said with reddened eyes, "What is Hassan?" He was still sucking on milk when his lordship was already the implicit king of the northern battlegrounds. We've been fighting in the field with Bianchi for almost 20 years. There's no way the armored cavalry led by his lordship can lose. Guo Wulai was promoted by Xiao Jiming himself, but he had enlisted in the army alongside Xiao Fangxiu. He could not accept this. The tactics he used to fight against Huhlu in the field when he was stationed in Changzhou camp had been learned from Xiao Jiming, and while Xiao Fangxiu had never taught him before, Guo Wulai's style of combat was obviously picked up on the sly through his observations of Xiao Fangxiu. The sound of discussion in the hall increased, and the noise gradually grew to a crescendo. They were presently like a note on the brink of collapse. Every person's nerves were stretched taut with tension as they struggled to preserve the current stability of the Libe armored cavalry, but the sense that they were inching towards a complete breakdown still pervaded the atmosphere. The Prince of Libe was dead. This phrase was like a nightmare weighing down on everyone's mind, crushing them. They were helpless against Hassan. It was as if it was only at this moment that they came to the harsh realization that the Libe armored cavalry had already fallen a long way behind Amuer. Xiao Qiye found it noisy, but he did not utter another word other than its futile comment of his. It was here he sat, with a splitting headache. The injuries on his shoulder and arm simultaneously assaulted his consciousness on both sides. He heard Hassan, this name being shouted everywhere. This word was a shadow haunting him relentlessly. At night, Shenzhequan could not sleep well. He had to wake up every now and then to make sure that Xiao Qiye was still there, but when he awoke this night, Xiao Qiye was not inside. Shenzhequan got up and hurried over to the doorway, where he found Xiao Qiye standing in the courtyard, dressed only in a single layer of garment. It was snowing again. Xiao Qiye's shoulders were blanketed with a thin layer of snow. Upon hearing movements, he looked back and smiled faintly at Shenzhequan with an expression meant to reassure. Shenzhequan gazed at him. Xiao Qiye's eyes gradually reddened under that gaze of his. Shanzekwen watched Xiao Qiye's tears slide down slowly. He understood everything. To this day, Xiao Qiye was still lost in his memory of that blizzard. The wolf pup that had run alone for dozens of li had not returned home yet. Shanzekwen pushed open the door without even putting his shoes on. Xiao Qiye had already begun to choke with sobs. It was as if he finally found release from all that he had suppressed within him as he watched Shanzekwen approach. Tears streamed down his cheeks as he called out, "Lanzo." Shanzekwen embraced Xiao Qiye hard and stood on tiptoe to cover the back of Xiao Qiye's head, as if he was a barrier, taking the physically and emotionally battered Xiao Qiye completely into the protective shelter of his arms. End chapter. Qiang Jin Jiu. Book 2, Other Heroes of Chaos. Chapter 188, Offense and Defense. Li Bei was still deep in grief when Bianxia attacked again. After this battle, Hassan had become the indisputable and irreplaceable Isuhiri or hero of the Han-Shi tribe. His reputation was almost comparable to that of Amuer's, but he did not have the time to turn around and listen to compliments. He had to seize the opportunity to strike Li Bei where it hurt and shift the battleground to the west of the Tudalong banner, so that he could have the Bianxia cavalry take over the fertile pastures along the eastern mountain range of the Hongjian Mountains before the start of spring. Shai and Sha'ir camps suffered their most brutal attack of the year. With Zhang Sheng severely injured and unable to participate, Xiao Jiming deployed Zhao Hui and Guo Wulai to hold the fort, but the appearance of the scorpions caused both of them to suffer heavy casualties one after the other. The Li Bei armored cavalry was trapped in a predicament. Stripped of their heavy armor, they would have to face a swift and furious onslaught of slaughter from the elite forces of Bianxia, and the inability of the battle steeds of Li Bei to catch up to the Bianxia cavalry at the same time also meant that they would be unable to escape the moment they were caught in a trap. But put back on their heavy armor, and that elite unit of scorpions would pursue them relentlessly. Guo Wulai lost the 3 battles he fought, each time surviving by the skin of his teeth. In the month that followed, all the front lines of Li Bei came under attack. It was as though Hassan wielded a scimitar in his left hand and an iron hammer in his right, with every strike he dished out capable of landing a blow right at Li Bei's most vital point. And that was not just the most terrifying part about him. Hassan was also very clear about who his opponent was every time they crossed swords on the battleground. He was extraordinarily familiar with the battlefield and had committed all the commanding generals of Li Bei to memory, and so he could proactively adapt and deal with anyone that came his way. Amuer had taught all of his strategies to Hassan without reservation, and Hassan executed them with great skill and prowess on the northern battlegrounds. ******. Zhao Hui practically rolled off the back of his horse. The deputy general took off his helmet for him. Refusing to let anyone support him, Zhao Hui propped himself up on the ground and threw up everything in his stomach. Both of his hands were still trembling even now. He rolled over and lay on his back in the snow, panting hard. Shai Camp's commanding general, Zhao Hui, submits his military report. He said from this position, "We came across the scorpions in the north. Their numbers far exceeded 5,000. Squad 7, which acts as the left flank, was completely wiped out. The center was forced to retreat. We lost, again." This was swiftly recorded down by the personnel in charge. Urgent correspondences had to be immediately sent out of the camp with great haste and delivered to Dying before tomorrow night. Xiao Jiming was unable to get on his horse and wield his blade, so all the military affairs could only be dealt with remotely like this. To guard against surprise attacks, he gave the commanding generals of the various battlegrounds the authority and power to self-mobilize troops in the face of danger. But this also meant that commanding generals like Guo Wulai would have lost the chain holding them in check. Should they fall for a trap, they would probably never come back ever again. Guo Wulai came out from the tent and bent over with his hand extended. Zhao Hui waved his hand to indicate his inability to get up at the moment. That sense of nausea caused by being smashed senseless would not recede, and lying in the snow felt a little more comfortable. Wu Ziu is now guarding the Shazan camp, and the second young master has yet to recover from his injuries, so who is handling the task of transporting military supplies now? Guo Wulai fished out tobacco from his bosom and popped it right into his mouth to chew. He squatted beside Zhao Hui and asked, "Chen Yang." Zhao Hui spread out his arms and answered feebly. He seemed to know what Guo Wulai was concerned about, thus, he continued, "Chen Yang has been by the second young master's side since 6 years ago, taking care of the logistics, from the imperial army on a larger scale, to the residence's backyard on a smaller scale. There's nothing that can escape his calculations and planning. Chen Yang is currently in Bianbo camp making a survey of the entire territory so that he can anticipate all the major and minor supplies in advance. As long as the bridle paths stay unobstructed, he will be able to ensure that the various camps will have no lack of supplies." Looking at the fragments of snowflakes in the sky, Guo Wulai said, "We are short of battle steeds." They had already been starting to lack battle steeds at the beginning of autumn. The depletion of the horses back then was not this serious, and the stables in Dying could still cope with the demand. But now, the armor-wearing battle steeds could no longer withstand the heavy hammers, and their injuries were often far more severe than the soldiers. Then there was the bitter cold weather and environment. Their horses could not endure the cold as well as the ponies. The sky gradually darkened. Zhao Hui regained some of his energy and sat up. He reached out to wipe away a handful of blood, then said to Guo Wulai, "That one smash from the hammer made my nose bleed. I couldn't wipe it away in time and swallowed it all back down. Gross." Guo Wulai, with his head full of messy hair, did not want to stand up either, having squatted until his legs went numb. He paused for a moment, then said in a low and hoarse voice, "In the past, I considered Huhlu as one of Biancha's elites. But now that I've encountered Hassan, I realize Huhlu is a good-for-nothing." Zhao Hui brushed off the fragments of snow on his knees and said, "Hassan is bold in his deployment of people, and he has infinite tricks up his sleeves. He knows us inside out." He let loose a sigh. And this is where the difficulty lies. But they all tacitly knew that what was most formidable about Hassan was not yet put on display yet. Hassan had fought offensive and defensive battles with the Bianjun Commandery, the hardest troops of all to attack, in the south for several years. Compared to field battles, he was even better at attacking cities. Now that Libai had completely switched from offensive to defensive, the battleground camps had become rudimentary cities. It would not be long before they got a personal taste of Hassan's barrage of attacks coming down on them like the torrential rain. Guo Wulai hated Hassan with every fiber of his being, but even he had to concede that Hassan was absolutely a genius born for the battlefields. To date, Guo Wulai had never met a general who could hold and control the initiative so firmly in his hand like this. He was just as unpredictable as a gale. He did not give Libai another chance to fight back at all. Whoever takes the initiative controls the rhythm. Guo Wulai spat out the chewed tobacco. We have to disrupt his pace even if we lose. Otherwise, we won't have to wait until the beginning of spring. In less than half a month, the battle zones will fall into their hands. The light from the flame in the distance flickered. Both men looked at it from afar in silence before suddenly scrambling to their feet. Fuck. Braving the wind, Guo Wulai pointed at the watchtower and bellowed, "Are you fucking blind? Who's in the southeast?" The armored cavalry on the watchtower raised a palm to shield himself from the wind and heard the sound of horses' hooves downwind. But a bridle path connecting to Sha'ir camp lay in the southeast, and he could not immediately determine in this short of a time who exactly was coming. The cavalry. Zhao Hui took several steps back to pick up his helmet from the ground, then shouted with all his might, "It's the Biancha cavalry. Sha'ir camp has fallen." Guo Wulai hissed through gritted teeth. Hassan, that son of a bitch. In the chaos that ensued, they watched as that flame came charging right towards them. The night patrol squad did not sound the alarm, so it was highly possible that the southeast had already been cut off. Other than the sound of hooves, there were clearly other sounds mixed in, too. The stone catapults, the helmet in Zhao Hui's palm slipped to the ground. He said in a daze, "We're done for." Dogshit. Guo Wulai hauled Zhao Hui up and shouted all around him as he strode briskly, "Extinguish the flames in the watchtower." Guo Wulai suddenly shoved Zhao Hui and followed up with a punch that made Zhao Hui's nose bleed again. "What are you, a dog?" Zhao Hui covered his nose and spat out the froth of blood. "We are wolves." Guo Wulai turned back and stared viciously towards the southeast. The hardest iron wall to fight in this world is not the Bianjun commandery but the Libai armored cavalry. He pounded his own chest with a clenched fist and hollered all around him, "The battleground in the north belongs to Xiao Fangxiu, and the Libai armored cavalry rule this expanse of battlefield. Whoever the fuck is a dog can jolly well eat shit. I will never retreat. We are wolves." His eyes were both red as he shouted in a hoarse voice, "Bite these motherfuckers to death." Zhao Hui wiped his nosebleed and kicked Guo Wulai from behind. Guo Wulai, with stubble on his face, locked eyes with Zhao Hui and asked, "Isn't Hassan the most adept at attacking cities?" Zhao Hui picked up his helmet again and sniffled. "He won't be adept at it soon." There was a click as the mechanism trigger kicked into action, and the baffles swiftly sealed off the crenels in all four sides of the camp walls, instantly turning Shai camp into an impregnable fort shaped like an iron drum. The Biancha cavalry stopped a short distance away. Through the darkness of the night, Hassan saw the heavy crossbow mechanisms protruding from those city walls. A few years before, Xiao Jiming had transformed Shai, Sha'er, and Shazan camps into heavy-duty ramparts. Just like how Xiaoqi had felt when he faced the Shazan camp, Hassan very quickly came to the understanding that this was the real impenetrable defense, one which did not leave a single opportunity for their foes to take advantage of. The watchtower torches were extinguished, making it totally impossible for one standing outside to get a glimpse into what was happening within the walls or even try to figure out the layout within. There were also two mounted crossbows forged by Qidong hidden away in Shai camp. Xiao Jiming had gone to painstaking lengths back then to keep them from the prying eyes of Chu capital. The Libai armored cavalry pushed out the mounted crossbows, and while the heavy arrows were in the process of being loaded, Biancha stone catapults had already kicked into action. Boulders as heavy as 100 jing came hurtling through the air, smashing into the walls of the camp. The crenels in the walls of Shai camp were reserved as stations for archers. In order to seal these up during special circumstances, a more mobile parapet had been selected. But parapets were made from wood and could not withstand the force of bombardment. Hassan clearly had his eyes on this weakness. "Release the arrows, release the arrows." Guo Wulai took large strides, slapping the backs of the cavalry as he passed by them. A storm of short arrows shot forth. Zhao Hui saw through an opening of the battlement that the cavalry had long retreated, and the infantry had replaced them in front. They erected a dense array of iron shields in the face of the hail of arrows. The arrows rained down on the surface of the shields, but could not inflict any damage on anyone at all. "That's the iron shield of the Qidong garrison troops," Zhao Hui said. He swallowed up the advantages of the battlefields in the north and south whole. "Is he a jackal or what?" Guo Wulai said at the top of his voice as he supported himself against the wall and listened to the intensifying sound of smashing rocks. "That's no longer a cavalry." He was right. Having expanded their infantry with iron shields, they were no longer purely a cavalry. The commanding generals were not wrong in predicting that Biancha had, in the past 6 years, acquired resources they could not even begin to imagine. This was the source of the changes Hassan was able to make. The loading of the mounted crossbows was time-consuming. Dozens of men simultaneously exerted their strength, but for some reason, this crossbow simply would not move just before it was fired. "Is it damaged?" Guo Wulai lifted the man away, stomped on the crossbow, and pounded on it irritably a few times. "Bloody hell, Qidong's contraption." Before Guo Wulai could finish his words, That crossbow trigger clicked into action, and the heavy arrows shot forth. Guo Walai's outfit got caught onto an arrow, and in that instant it went flying. It dragged Guo Walai over, causing him to fall flat on his face. The jarring sound of those iron-headed heavy arrows slicing through the wind followed close on the arrows' trail as they hurtled through the air. The iron shields of Biancha were erected once again, but it was a futile attempt as the force of impact caved the shields in. And as the soldiers were standing too close together, the resulting shockwave caused the 2 rows of people in the rear to topple over to the ground in unison. Zhao Hui wanted to report the good news, but before he could open his mouth, the wall baffle beside his head exploded. Reacting quickly, he crouched down with his hands covering his head and was nearly stabbed in the eye by a flying wooden splinter. The wall baffle was destroyed. Damn it! Zhao Hui muttered to himself with his head and face covered in dust. I'll have to tell the heir apparent to get them changed to iron ones. The whistle outside sounded all of a sudden, and the Saker falcon swooped down through the thick clouds. Guo Walai followed suit and blew the whistle. The falcon cage beside the stable drew open with a swoosh. Each of the falcons that had been preserving their strength these past few days was brimming with energy. Meng flapped its wings as the ropes on its claws rattled. The soldiers taking care of the falcons untied the ropes. Meng, who would not listen to the whistled command of others at all, soared into the sky, circling among the dancing snow to break through the layers of clouds. The next instant, it began to dive. Iron claws clutched at a Saker falcon's flesh and feathers, tearing it into pieces in the air. At this critical juncture, Guo Walai heard the sound of the back gates opening. He immediately turned his head back, but he did not get to shout out, for a column of light cavalry was entering swiftly. The cloak of the person in the lead flapped in the wind as she got off her horse before Guo Walai. Yo! Qiang greeted Guo Walai in her usual tone. Busy fighting. Zhao Hui turned over to jump down and trade looks with Guo Walai in between breaths. Not knowing Qiang's intent for coming, he said, Commander-in-Chief. Don't call me that. Qiang took off her cloak and drew out the executioner blade at the side of her waist. She stabbed it into the ground by her feet with a thud and said with a laugh, I shall have to inconvenience you guys to hook up with me tonight. Guo Walai promptly covered his chest and stared at Qiang as she surveyed the surroundings. Let's see, she said calmly, who is tougher, your Libai armored cavalry, or Arkadong garrison troops? End chapter.